Hello, good morning. My name's Joel Stafford. I'm Commercial Product Manager at E.ON, so I'm a bit different to probably the main crowd here. I'm not an analyst as such, but I've been invited here today to talk about a project that we've been working on that uses quite a lot of data. And the two questions of the day, high quality and cheap data, and how do we validate it, are actually something that we've been thinking about quite a lot at E.ON. Something that's been on my mind for about 18 months now, so it actually fits really well. One thing I would say is there's no maths involved. So when you were talking about that equation just there, I was thinking back to university when I did econometrics and statistics and sort of thinking, I wish I'd never have to see those again. It's not my strong point. My strong point's more sort of thinking about how we can apply things to sort of real world. And I'm hoping that when I talk you through the project that we're working on, you'll see how we're taking data sets from multiple different sources. Some of them are cheap, some of them aren't, some of them are difficult, some of them are very easy. But I'm going to argue about how using them all together and using them in the right way actually delivers us and delivers E.ON really good, tangible benefits on the ground. Bit about the team I work in first. A lot of you probably only really think of E.ON as an energy supplier, so buying and selling energy and providing it to your house. There's a lot more to us than that. I work in a department called Obligation Delivery, where the prime focus is to provide boilers, cavity wall insulation, other energy efficiency measures into homes. One, to raise the sort of level and standard of homes in the UK, and two, to hopefully lower bills for the vulnerable and the fuel poor. So that's our focus essentially in the department. My team is called Commercial Services. Now what Commercial Services do is think about how we can realise efficiencies and save money and deliver things in a better way. A big problem we've got at the moment is the vulnerable market is large, but they're usually the hardest to engage with, and they're actually the hardest to find, because if you're vulnerable, you wouldn't necessarily reach out to someone and say, look at me, I'm vulnerable, I need help. A lot of the time you kind of hide away. So we've been struggling quite a lot as a business to find the right people to deliver to, and that's causing our search costs or our marketing costs to rise quite a lot. So Commercial Services were tasked with thinking about, is there anything we can do to improve the way that we can target the right communities, identify the right communities, and deliver the right measures. I came into the business about 18 months ago and was handed a project called ThermCert, which stands for Thermal Carbon Efficiency Reporting Tool. And my objective was create E.ON a dashboard that allows us to manipulate data sets to find eligible properties and people to deliver our energy efficiency measures to. So that's a bit of background on what I'm going to speak about today. My first slide just talks about how I interpreted the first question of how do we argue for high quality relevant data rather than easy cheap data. Whilst I've been managing this project, I've thought about four things really, and four things that to me make data high quality, and they are accuracy, age, completeness, and uniqueness. And as I take you through the tool, I'll show you the data sets that are in there, and I'll talk about how many of those four points they meet. They don't all meet all four. There's always drawbacks in the data that we're using, but I'll explain sort of how we combat those. And then when I think about data relevance, in reality, in my job, data is relevant when it can be applied to a situation that I need to apply it to, and when it can contribute to a solution to that problem. Data can be relevant for me, but it wouldn't be relevant for someone else. And the same way goes that data could be relevant for someone else in this room, that in reality, for the work that I'm doing, isn't relevant. So relevant really is more of a concept. You can't label a single data set as relevant or not relevant, and that's the point I'm going to take through today. So a bit of background into the project then. E.ON are sort of the industrial partner. We're the sort of big company that has the issue. We reached out to AstraSat, who are a software development company, and they specialise in taking data and doing really, really cool things to it. And they specialise in access to space data as well. So they have access to thermal data and other space products that I'll talk you through later that are really unique. The project at the moment is a demonstration project, and it's sponsored by the European Space Agency. So they're looking at it from a perspective of validating whether the methods are correct and whether data is being used properly. We've done a video. It's about a year old now, so the screens that you'll see are very out of date compared to what I'm going to show you in a minute, but it explains the tool very well. I'm hoping everything goes smoothly when I go on to the next slide and the video should start playing. There's a lot of people up and down the country living with financial vulnerability or vulnerability to do with disability, and the thing they all have in common is they're very difficult to find.
Astrosat's a software company based in Musselburgh, just outside Edinburgh. We use data from space to solve Earth-based problems.
E.ON are working with Astrosat and the European Space Agency to develop a project that's a local community-based tool that helps us find people that live in certain vulnerabilities.
We're taking data from 15 to 20 satellites that are orbiting the Earth, and then overlaying that with existing publicly available data to develop this application to help solve some of the challenges that councils face.
Local mayors, local authorities, people who look after housing stock, they want to understand the problems of their local community and they want to solve these problems.
Users of this application, whether they're in E.ON or in local councils, will be able to select multiple data sets from the large number that we're loading into the application, and then overlay those data sets to provide a visual representation highlighting where challenges are within the local area.
The ESA Business Applications programme supports the ThermCert project. ESA Business Applications aims to grow industries who are involved in the programme, as well as deliver benefit to society as a whole. And the ThermCert project ticks both of those boxes, so it helps reduce cost for energy and also improves energy efficiency.
E.ON have been delivering energy efficiency measures to vulnerable individuals for a long period of time now, and we're constantly looking at ways that we can innovate, make it more efficient and deliver more measures to more people. By combining the data, we can get much better at targeting the right people and also in the right way. So that video is a year old. I'm in exactly the same suit. So there were some screens in there of the tool. Look very different to what it does now. We've been through a year and a half of quite fast-paced development. A lot of time's been spent on the tool, but to really understand how we're using data, the best thing to do is to click through a demo with you today, which I'm going to do now. I'm going to list all the data that's in there, and as I go through each data set, I'm going to tie them to those 4 things that I mentioned earlier, the accuracy, age, completeness, and uniqueness. If we just zoom in to Stafford, as that's an area of interest for E.ON, we can then look at Stafford as a whole. Now, Stafford as a whole has about 350,000 properties. For E.ON to operate a project at scale, we can't just market to or try and contact 350,000 properties. That would be ridiculous. It would cost too much money. So the way the tool is going to be used and the way that we use data within the tool is to try and limit that 350,000 properties to a much smaller, manageable number, but also a highly relevant number of eligible people and properties. And the way we've done that is by using data. So I'll flick them up onto dark mode and open the data tab. There's 4 categories of data at the moment within our tool. Number 1 is our own data. 2 is data about properties and houses. 3 is data about the people in communities in the houses. And then 4 is the really unique data sets that Astrosat have provided that look from satellites and space. E.ON's data is essentially our past activity. Where have we previously installed? What have we installed and who have we installed to? Now, if I think about those four points, accuracy, this is as accurate as we can get. There's nothing better. Age, yes, some of our energy efficiency measures were delivered 10 years ago, but some of them were delivered last week. It's about as up to date as I can possibly get. Completeness is where this data set falls down. We can only see what we've done, and there's a number of other suppliers, a number of other big players that also deliver energy efficiency measures. We've probably got about 10 or 13% of the market, so that means that about 87% of this data set that I can't see. And uniqueness, of course, it's unique to us. There's a bit of a paradox here, because if I wanted to complete this data set, I'd probably have to give up the uniqueness, because if I was going to see the complete data set from the entire industry, other players would quite rightly turn to us and say, well, we want to see yours too. So by taking away uniqueness, you get completeness, but you still only have 3 of 4. But that doesn't mean it's not a high-quality data set. This is still a very high-quality data set for us, and it's very relevant. Within housing data, we've got property archetype, tenure, heating fuel, and EPCs. Now, the vast majority of this data is from the 2011 census at the moment, and the EPC data is from the EPC database. For those who don't know, every house that's sold or rented has to have an EPC, which stands for an energy performance certificate. It just ranks a property on how high or low the bills would be based on the quality of the build. So if you think about accuracy, in reality, the census is about as accurate as you can really hope for things like this. It's the biggest survey in the country. You would assume that people answer relatively truly. There's no reason to lie. Big tick in the box. Age, massively out of date. It's 8 years since the last census. If I think about the work that E.ON have done in 8 years, think about the work the industry have done, I know in reality a lot's changed, but I can only see what was answered in 2011. As soon as the next census comes around, I'll have a complete refresh of numbers, and suddenly there's a tick in the box again. But at the moment, it falls down there. Completeness, again, it's pretty complete. You have to answer the census. It's probably the largest of any sort of data set we can get our hands on. Big tick in the box. Uniqueness, again, it falls down. It's open source. Anyone can use it. It's not special to me. I'm not gaining any advantage by using it. Then we have community data. We've loaded in the index multiple deprivation, access to healthy assets, and fuel poverty. Now, I'm quite excited to see that CDRC is sponsoring the event today. The CDRC was one of our prime sort of go-tos for market research, and it almost like set the bar in terms of visualizing data and mapping data. Deprivation's massive for us because it shows us where really those vulnerable communities are and where those really, really eligible people are. It's a massive tick, and it shows us where we need to go. The access to healthy assets and hazards index was also something we took a look at and thought, you know what, that's actually really cool. It's never been done before. For those who aren't aware, it essentially measures a community's access to a healthy asset, which is classed as things like hospitals or GPs, or leisure centres, or a hazard, which is things like pubs, tobacconists, things that damage health. So it's really quite a different take on vulnerability. It's not thinking about the people themselves, but the community and the access that they have. And fuel poverty is straight from the government. So accuracy, again, big tick. I believe these are the most accurate in their field that you can get. They've been validated and have been tested. Age, they're both as up to date as we can get. Fuel poverty has just been updated by the government, and we refreshed our tool almost immediately. Completeness, again, massive tick. They cover the whole country, which is what we need. Uniqueness falls down again because it's not unique to E.ON. It's open source. People are allowed to use it, and people are allowed to look at it. Again, it's nothing special to us. The last category is the space data, which is split into 2. Space products, which are data sets derived from satellite images, and then there's satellite imagery as well, and that's used as more of a marketing ploy than actual data usage. These are probably our most high quality, if I was going to take it back to those 4 points. Accurate, they come direct from satellites. They're as accurate in their field as they can possibly be. Age, every time something new happens, it just relays, it opens it up, it's constantly updated. Completeness covers the entire country. There's no sort of black spots. And uniqueness, I think, is a massive tick here. As far as I'm aware, we haven't seen anyone else be using thermal imagery from satellites, and we definitely haven't seen anyone else using the data behind those images, which I'll touch on later, to create brand new data sets and show us different things about communities. So that's the data that we're using. I want to demonstrate now how I actually apply that in the business, and to do that, I need to talk about another project that we're running. So I highlighted in on Staffordshire at the start. My team are also extending the gas network and installing central heating systems into properties in Staffordshire that have never been connected before. The prime drama of that is fuel poverty. People on electric heating pay £300, £400 more per year, and if they're also quite vulnerable, that £300, £400 saving that we could possibly give them is actually quite big. So we've got to deliver 800 first-time central heating systems and 200 boilers in 2 years. How do we do that? I'm going to demonstrate how I've used the tool to help us. So I touched on earlier there being 350,000 houses. I'm going to now show you how I use the data, utilise them together, map them and integrate them to get down to a much more manageable number. I've loaded 4 data sets into the right-hand side of the tool: heating systems, gas, heating, index multiple deprivation, and I've loaded the heat map in as well. Now, as a user, I have to adjust what I want to see based on my criteria. So I've just pulled a paddle at the top right-hand corner in heating systems right down to 15. I don't want to see areas where E.ON have previously gone and absolutely hammered, because there's not going to be a massive opportunity there for me, and I need to build a project at scale. What I've just done is essentially going on Excel and filtering, but I've done it much more quick, and I can go up and down as I want. I'd then move on to gas, and I'd load gas in. So as you see now, the second histogram on the right has become active, but the top histogram has stayed exactly how it was. The data starts to interact with each other. It doesn't refresh every time we look at something new. From my perspective, I need to limit gas down to 80%, because I don't want to see those areas that are really, really high propensity of gas connections, because again, there's not that scalable opportunity. But similarly to that, I don't want to see the areas that have absolutely no gas connections, because there's usually a reason for that. One, it's too rural to connect, or two, there's something that stopped the gas connection going in there in the first place. As you can see, every time we edit the map, areas drop out. The map pushes me away from those areas and makes me focus in on areas that are still live, that are meeting all my criteria. If we move on to the index multiple deprivation and just limit that to the bottom 50%, again, it's taking away a vast majority of the map. There's a little clump down there in Tamworth where there's a lot of communities that are still live. They still meet all my criteria. So I'd go and have a look at that. I'd zoom in. I want you to focus more on the colour scales now. It's not groundbreaking, but the lighter areas are the most deprived, the darker areas are the least deprived of what I'm looking at. Flick it back to gas. The lighter areas have less gas connections, the darker areas have more gas connections. So I can see there's an area just above Belgrave that's pretty poor in both of those areas. It's a good interest for me. I'm going to go have a look at it. But first I'll flick on the heat map. There's something I want to say about the heat map. It fit all those 4 factors that I consider to be high quality. This is about as high quality as you can possibly get from a satellite. But as it stands there, is it particularly relevant to me? Probably not. Can I go to Tamworth Borough Council and say, I want to go and do a scheme in Belgrave? They'll ask me why. I'll say because it's a little bit yellow. It's not going to fit with them. So what we've done is take the map and the data behind it and actually provide metrics, which I'll touch on in a minute. Flick back to Tamworth then. Go into that area. Now you see I've just clicked on that area now, and the left-hand corner's gone down from 350,000 houses to 480 houses. Much more manageable number, and I can start to actually have a look at that community and have a look at what the houses like, what the people like. Is there an opportunity? So I start playing around with the left-hand side of the screen, which we call the fact sheet. So I've just dropped down central heating, and I've highlighted electric heating. Of those 480 properties, 239, which is pretty much bang on 50%, are electric. That's exactly what I need. It's scalable, and it's very condensed. It'd be very easy to deliver. I've now flicked on thermal satellite data. The chart at the top is essentially the heat map graphed in a distribution. A normal distribution, we've looked at all the images of the UK, bundled them together, and the guys at Astra have done some very clever things and basically put a scale on from 0 to 1 and measured it average to the rest of the country. Now I can go to Tamworth and say, actually, heat loss is better than average. They might turn around to me and say, well, why do you want to operate there? Very good question. Heat loss isn't necessarily the be-all or end-all. There are other reasons for heat loss from the top of properties than just inefficient housing. So we've started thinking about what other data sets from the ground can we add in to the thermal satellite data to move away from just heat loss to pure energy efficiency. So we've loaded in some of the information from EPCs, some of the heating information, some of the deprivation information, and the guys at Astrosat have built a machine learning algorithm that has mapped the entire country and ranked it 1 to 42,000 based on communities. This community sits in the bottom 40%, so it's below average. So I have a better story to say then. I can say to Tamworth, yes, you're not actually losing that much heat, but the energy efficiency of your homes isn't great. And that can be because people just can't afford to turn their heating on. There are more reasons behind thermal efficiency than just pure heat maps. And that's something we're working out slowly as we start to add data and integrate it together. I can do this for a number of other areas. This is Burton, this is Stafford, and this is Newcastle-under-Lyme. All areas within Staffordshire that have shown me there's an opportunity there at scale and I can meet my targets. So just to recap on the first question really before I talk about how we started to validate these, I haven't paid any money for any of these data sets. They're all cheap and they're all relatively easy. Admittedly, the space products took a bit of time to work out, but it wasn't months and months. So I thought about what's great about what we've done already. 1, zero cost. 2, starting to cross-validate is removing some of those inaccuracies that were spoken about earlier. We've saved on time and resource. I've just taken you through a clickable demo that took me maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Previously, people in the office have to trawl through spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet, make their own tables, pivot tables. It takes time. We can do it quickly now. And it's perfect for creating these projects at scale. It's not perfect for everything. There are obviously drawbacks. Rarely the most up-to-date information, especially when you're looking at properties. Granularity could definitely be improved. At the moment, we're looking at lower super output areas. That's because, 1, a lot of data is collected at that level, or at least it's released to us at that level. Data is collected from multiple different sources, which can be a good thing, but can also be a bad thing. Sometimes we've found that data is not always collected in the same way, which sometimes makes it harder to draw concrete conclusions about how they relate to each other. And the general issues around using cheap data do leave us open to be disputed. But the quality and relevance, I don't believe, is never truly known until you've tested it and you've validated it on the ground. And that validation process should let me combat those disputes very well. And this moves me quite nicely onto question 2, which was all about how do we know when it's good enough and fit for purpose? And then 2, how do we check? So I've taken you through a bit of a demonstration that on paper looks really good for how I've thinned my market right down to relevant areas. And there's a sizable opportunity of about 800 houses there that I can go and hit. Perfect. It's not as easy as that, I think we all know. So we've started validating internally on the Staffordshire project. As you can see, I've just sort of highlighted those 4 areas that I looked at the tool. In total, there's 2,963 properties in these communities. The target would be the ones that are electrically heated, and that amounts to about 835 in these 4 areas. I said right at the start, it'd be silly and a waste of money to try and market to those 350,000 people. So instead, we're just going to market slowly to the just under 3,000, and we're going to do that in a number of ways. We're not going to send letters out from E.ON. We're going to do exactly what I described earlier. I'm going to approach Tamworth Borough Council, I'm going to approach Burton, I'm going to approach Stafford, I'm going to have conversations with them, and I'm going to highlight where we think we need to start these projects, and the communications is going to be led from them. We're also going to work with a lot of charities in the area that are trying to do just this, and they can be our voice on the ground. So instead of just sort of hitting and hoping, we're taking this with us, and we're talking to the right people in the communities to get the right people engaged. At the moment, the scheme's seen a 25% conversion rate, which is actually really good for a scheme of such in the energy industry, that would mean that 740 properties would sign up from those areas, which is great. At the moment, we've just done Tamworth, and we've got about 70. So the 25% conversion rate, if it carries on, should be giving us quite good numbers there. These 4 areas aren't the only 4 areas in the county that are relevant. They're just the 4 I picked to show you today. There's 20, 30, 40, and you can start to build up sizable numbers here. With that conversion rate, the target becomes a lot more manageable. We've also started some validation with external partners. So I'm going to describe to you now a project that a member of my team's working on. He's working with a digital marketing agency to just generate leads for energy efficiency installs. Now, previously, we just kind of gave them the go out there, get us some leads, we'll pay you per lead. What we've done is now say, right, carry on what you're doing, but we also want to direct you to certain areas based on what the data is telling us. And we want you to ring fence those areas because we want to see the difference in performance from the ring fenced areas compared to the national campaign. Our hypothesis was 1, reduction in marketing costs or search costs, 2, there'd be a higher conversion rate, and 3, that would result in a better operational efficiency for the department. So we've picked Blackburn, Manchester, Doncaster, around Cardiff and Swansea, and Birmingham, and the areas in there are the areas that are relevant, and we've geo-fenced the marketing to that area. Bit of a comparison of how they're performing. We've seen an 83% reduction in market size. So previously, we were just hitting the Facebook feeds of 25 million households. We're now only targeting 4 million. Our response rate has now gone up 370% per million households. We're engaging more people through the use of targeted media and targeted identification. That little graph at the top there is the national average of how we see our schemes. If we got 500 responses, we'd expect 30 of those to qualify, 30%, sorry. We'd then expect 25% of those to pass a survey, and then we'd expect 15% of those to actually get an install. There's a lot of dropout through this process for a number of reasons. Results of the targeted trial, we're seeing a 10% increase in pre-qualifications, a 20% increase in survey, and a 15% increase in the number of installs. What that translates to is for 500 leads nationally, we'd get about 5 installs out of it. Targeted, we'll get about 9. Now that doesn't seem massive, but we're talking about quite small pilots here. We're actually seeing the cost per install go down from just over 2,000 to about 1,300, and it's about a 45% decrease in costs. So it's a massive tick box at the moment, and it's given us justification to start widening our reach. We're just at the start at the minute, and we're constantly improving, and we're constantly thinking about ways we can go. But at the moment, the initial validation is really, really positive. So to finish off, I just wanted to talk about a few learnings and conclusions that I've had from working on this project and working with data, tying them back to those initial questions. My first point is that easy and cheap data can also be high quality and relevant, and I hope I've proved that to you today. And it all depends on what you're using it for and how you apply it. Lower quality data sets can be used together to enhance the overall quality of your message. So a lot of my data sets on their own give me one little piece of information, but I can't action anything off it. By using 4 or 5 together, it becomes very relevant, and I start to think if they're all pointing me in the same direction, they must be right, or they're very likely to be right. However, the very best data, the very granular data, the sort of the highest quality, in reality, is usually locked away or it's behind a paywall. And that makes it really difficult because if you want to validate something, you don't want to pay through the roof for it. I can't turn around to the business and say, I want to spend loads of money on this data set because I think it might work. And so that becomes a very difficult conversation to have. Validation of data quality and relevance is also very difficult because we're seeing quite a lot of success in our pilots, but at the moment, can I tie it down to a specific data set? Probably not. I can make some pretty good conclusions, but more testing is needed. And finally, the best way to validate whether data is good enough and whether it's fit for purpose is to just use it for the purpose intended and see the results. Otherwise, you're never going to know how it hits. That finishes off my talk. I hope it was quite interesting. We're here all day, and Astra's out here as well. If any of you wanted to see the tool in actual real life demonstrated on a screen, we can probably all pull it up now. I was going to demonstrate it, but a lot of things could have gone wrong. The internet might have died. So I hope a clickable demo sort of showed you a snapshot into what we're doing. If you've got any questions now, I'll take them. Otherwise, just catch me at some point today.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. So 2 things. Thanks really for engaging with the topic of the day so neatly. One of the things I really like is if you put in the effort for the data, as you said, it doesn't need to be rocket science. And that's one of the great values of data. And I really liked your pushback on the idea that just because it's easy and cheap doesn't necessarily mean it's not high quality and relevant. So thank you for pushing back. So are there any questions anybody wants to ask? Paul.
Paul Romney from CDRC at University College London. Thank you very much for your talk, which is very interesting. I wonder if you could say something about time, okay, in this era when we've got lots of smart meter data and renewable energy comes on stream sometimes a day and not at others. Have you any high-level thinking about how you incorporate time of day, week, month, year
into energy usage data? Yes. There's trust me, there's been workshops back at the business about what else we could use, what other departments we could use it in. At the moment, it's basically for obligation delivery. It's about finding energy efficiency measures. But you're quite right. E.ON and other people have wealth of data. There's data everywhere that we can use, and we've got to think about how we can bring it into the tool properly. At the moment, it is very much a vulnerable mapping tool, so it's looking for the vulnerable. But in 2-3 years, our obligation might change and might be opened out, and we might have to start looking at things like smart meters, because that sort of data then becomes extremely relevant. You're quite right.
I have question at the back.
So my pain from Rasmus, as the guy who did the space data one here, I can absolutely certify this is rocket science.
Well, that's quite true, actually. I'd forgotten that obvious analogy. But it's data that's the rocket bit, not the actual bit of science afterwards. So thank you. I was also interested. You mentioned you got the fuel poverty data from the government. Is that one of the examples of the benefits of the Digital Economy Act? Is that when it started? Because I'm quite keen to see where we get benefits from all that.
I'm not really sure. The government just update fuel poverty statistics every year. It's 2 years delayed, but every year they update it. It's based on sort of surveys, based on answers, but it's always been open source fuel poverty. It's one of the easiest ones to get our hands on.
Right.
Naturally, because it's probably one of our biggest needs, I guess. But I'm not sure about the digital economy.
The other thing I can't resist pointing out is once you chose bravely to work through local authorities, you inevitably create slow outputs, which is actually one of the things I've been advocating. But so thank you very much, Joel.
Thank you.
Great.